Richard Pyatt. Welcome back to Pest Prospectives. We're talking with the pest professionals at PEST PROs of Michigan about a number of things that maybe involve some visitors that you didn't count on, invite, collect rent from, all of those things. But also, we're going to zoom out a little bit today and just talk about when it's time to call a pest control professional. Many of us try to tackle this ourselves and deal with some of these issues, and at some point we cross a threshold where we say, okay, I need help, but sometimes that might not be all that clear. We're back with Tony Sorrentino from PEST PROs, Associate Certified Entomologist, among the pros at PEST PROs to help us understand. Hi, Tony.
Richard, it's good to see you again.
It's good to be back with you. So this is really key information. How do you know when it's time to call someone like you to step in and take over a pest control situation? How do we understand when DIY is not enough?
Oh, that's a really good question. It comes down to like your tolerance level or your action threshold. Like some people see one spider and everything's cool. Some people see one spider and it's one too many. So in the case of like a complex infestation like termites don't go away on their own. You know, they found their way into your house. They're not just gonna, well, we'll just paint over it. It ought to be okay.
Right.
Termites require professional intervention. Bed bugs, 9 times out of 10, I know that people have solved bed bug problems on their own, sometimes using unorthodox or sometimes dangerous methodologies to do that. Rodents too, bed bugs, rodents, termites, German cockroaches. These insects and rodents can be extremely tenacious where they get into these areas where you can't get them out.
So at that point, we're above our pay grade, you might say, and we're ready to invite in a professional. What are some of the other points you can make about understanding when it's time?
If it's a recurring problem, it happens every year at this time. Every fall, we start seeing mice. There's something deeper that's happening that's allowing this to happen every year. It's an underlying sign that needs to be professionally assessed and addressed.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. If you're seeing it recur, then that means we as lay people are not solving the problem.
That's usually the case. Another thing that we commonly deal with and that's often overlooked is there's health and safety risks that are associated. Pests like stinging insects pose an allergic threat risk, especially if they're agitated and swarm somebody and they could sting someone to death. Mosquitoes, which can carry like the West Nile virus, ticks, they carry different arboviruses that can be transmitted to humans. And then with rodents, there's zoonotic diseases that are transferable from rodents to humans. And then they chew on wires and they could start fires. They cause structural damage. These things need to be addressed.
Yeah, that all is quite serious. I mean, I was bringing a little levity to the conversation a moment ago, but when we start talking about things like that, which you've just mentioned, now we're really getting into the serious nature of this. So now we've decided we need a professional, but there are also some other signs that might help underscore this. Signs that someone like you who knows the broad spectrum of pests and situations to correct those situations have in mind that we might not. For example, there might be some activity we don't even see or know about.
Absolutely. Unidentified pest activity. If you're seeing signs like the corners of your garage door is chewed out, or once there was a carpenter bee and then a woodpecker came and made the hole a little bit bigger, and now the flying squirrels are getting into that hole, and now we've got a whole menagerie of insects, birds, and mammals living in the walls of your home. When is it time to call?
Yeah, boy. I dealt with carpenter bees once. They're not fun. And then now you really broadened that whole thing about how that can eventuate. And speaking of that, there could be structural damage, and someone like me might not see that.
You might not, especially in the case of like termites or carpenter ants or wood boring beetles. Sometimes the damage is going on right underneath your nose. You don't know what's happening. There are telltale signs, but it may be overlooked by a layperson. Getting a set of trained eyes that has had the time and the experience to understand what's really happening inside of your home and that has the expertise to get after it and make sure that it gets handled effectively.
Makes a difference.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of structural damage, sometimes we might see some of it, even though maybe it wasn't obvious. There could be other entry points we don't know about.
We saw the one where the plumbing penetration comes in from by the air conditioner.
Yep.
You saw that one and you stuffed it up with some copper stuff it and you put some caulk on it and you thought you were good to go. What you didn't see was that linear gap underneath the edge of your siding along the foundation wall where there's still access, or those corner caps around the edges where the siding comes together. It's open entry points.
Well, so there's some comment here about the doctor who treats himself, right? But generally speaking, we don't know necessarily about these things, and we may not spot something like a large scale infestation. There can be a situation that is much more broad under the surface that we're not seeing.
Absolutely. And we talked about the health risk earlier, and that's expanded when we're dealing with, like, let's just take like a multi-unit property, a multi-family property, like an apartment complex. Shared walls make for easy traveling and access for the pests to get from one unit to another.
Hmm.
Rodents can move in between walls. The whole time, allergens are being dispersed, unsanitary conditions are being carried from one place to another. There are all sorts of health risks associated with high level pest infestations. It's critical. We can't spray and pray. We have to approach it holistically and attack the problem to get to the root cause and figure out long term solutions.
Yeah, and that's the practical viewpoint that Tony just talked about. It was not our intention to strike a bunch of fear in the minds of folks. However, it is good to be informed, right? And so, as you just pointed out, that's kind of the voice of reason there, speaking in terms of how you look at it as a professional. There are other advantages, too, for hiring a professional. The approach is going to be a professional one, right?
Absolutely. I know that Pest Pros utilizes an IPM approach. It's integrated pest management. There's 5 standard steps, and we utilize that in every aspect: identification, the plan of action, then act on it, monitor the results, and then adjust as necessary. It's how we get things done. It's never going to be a spray and pray. We have specialized tools and expertise. I'm an associate certified entomologist. Amber Byers on staff with us, an associate certified entomologist. Maria Sorrentino, she's the owner of Pest Pros. She's an associate certified entomologist. It just means that we've studied and taken the time to go above and beyond the standard certifications for the state of Michigan to have a deeper understanding from a scientific viewpoint of what pest management looks like.
I was going to say it may involve specialized tools as well, and
Mhm.
call to mind some specialized expertise that you've had, or some of you had, and you can brainstorm about all of that.
Absolutely. Maria's taken a great amount of time and spent a tremendous effort on making sure that we receive the highest level of training that's available to our industry. I've been down to New Mexico multiple times to train for subterranean termites. The bugs are the same everywhere we go, but they act differently depending on what environment they're in.
Hmm.
Sometimes in the south or in the desert, we're going to see different types of operations that handle different types of subterranean termites differently, right? In New Mexico, I just learned from, in my opinion, one of the best companies in the United States of America when it comes to termite control and just tactical and technical proficiency. We take time to send our wildlife consultants to these high level trainings for, and I used high level. Do you see what I did there? For elevated tasks, for metal bending, just to give us that edge, that technical expertise.
Yeah. And in doing so, someone who engages you as a person who's going to perform this service for them might be concerned. For example, if a rodent, let's say, was getting in and you've now sorted out a integrated pest management plan, you're using the tools you have available and the expertise. Now they might be concerned, what if it comes back? How do we handle it if that happens? They're concerned about follow up, right?
And well, everybody's concerned about follow up. I'm concerned. I've made decisions to make major purchases in my life based on the salesperson's ability and willingness to follow up with me. How well did you communicate? And so communication at that level is demonstration. Do we believe in the products that we sell and the services that we offer? And will we stand behind them? So if you get a whole house exclusion and we tell you that there's not going to be any mice back in there, not because of anything that we did, we're going to stand behind that. We're going to make sure that that gets handled.
Some of the other stuff to know too has to do with regulations, right? Local laws and requirements for pest control. This is something you want to have confidence that the person you're engaging to do this work knows.
And a lot of the information is on the label as far as application. A lot of the knowledge and the regulations come from Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And we routinely see and interact with the regulators there, the employees that work for MDARD. They come to our classes when we have Michigan Pest Management Association, CEU training. They come, they make sure that we're up to date on the regulations. And then we take that back to our staff and disperse the information.
So this is something that a potential customer should ask about. Are you up on regulations?
I think that's almost a platitude. I shouldn't have to. You should be up on regulations. And if you're not, you're doing something wrong. So, yeah, ask them.
It's certainly a signal, right, that maybe this person isn't up on those and they need to be.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. So understanding when it's time to call a pest control professional. There's just scratching the surface with Tony on some of these things that you should understand if you're at a point where you're saying, I don't know if it's time. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Here are some of the things to think about. Also, in the show notes for this episode, links to the Pest Pros of Michigan, where you can click through, understand better about the services they offer, and reach out if you need to. But man, this is an important point for a lot of folks when to call that professional. Tony Sorrentino, thank you for bringing us up to speed.
It's my pleasure, Richard. Thank you for having me.